Imagine stepping into a quiet American kitchen in 1954. The radio hums softly in the background, and on the dining room sideboard gleams a pale green ring of gel salad, dotted with cottage cheese and mint leaves, shimmering under a single bulb. This dish was once a star, an odd combination of lemon mint sparkle and cool cottage cheese swirl that spoke of optimism, post-war innovation, and the belief that even a humble side could feel festive. But today, it sits largely forgotten. Why did something so bright and bold vanish from our tables? In this episode of America's Lost Recipes, we pry open a faded cookbook, uncover the curious history of gelid salads, and ask, what does this wobbly, shimmering mold tell us about mid-century America, about thrift and showmanship, about the way families gathered? We trace the rise of gelatin sparkle in suburban homes, the daring fusion of savory and sweet, and the sudden fall-off into obscurity. Stay with us as we revive this strange relic and discover not just how to make it, but why so many kitchens once held it dear, and why it slipped away. By the end, you will see this dish not as a novelty, but as a window into a vanished kitchen culture. It begins with a quiet kitchen in 1952, a polished chrome refrigerator hums, the smell of brewed coffee lingers, and on the center of the Formica tabletop sits a pale green gelatin ring. Within its shimmering lemon mint curves lie cool cottage cheese curds and a scattering of chopped pine nuts. This was not merely a side dish, it was a statement. In the post-war American home, modern convenience met showy elegance, and the gelid salad became a trophy of domestic pride. At a time when gelatin deserts were celebrated as futuristic, clean and efficient, this salad captured imagination, lemon mint freshness, the creamy texture of cottage cheese, itself a humble yet protein-rich American dairy staple. And the mold ring form that demanded attention. It appeared at Sunday dinners, church potlucks, and mid-century bridal showers, its wobbling surface shimmering under the overhead light as neighbors whispered admiration. Yet as decades passed, taste shifted. The era that valued mold salads gave way to tossed greens, microwaves, and fast food. The lemon mint gelid salad, once futuristic, became retro, then forgotten. But behind its pastel hue lies a story of ambition, community, and the changing face of American home cooking. Today, we are reviving not just a recipe, but a forgotten moment of culinary optimism. Stay with us as America's Lost Recipes unmolds this ring of memory and sets it on the table once more, because every lost dish has a story worth telling. It began in kitchens humming with optimism, sometime in mid-century America. Amid the roar of mixers and the gleam of chrome appliances, home bakers reached for something both familiar and novel, shredded coconut and chopped walnuts folded into a loaf. But the secret twist came from something more subtle, brown butter, that nutty, golden elixir that quietly transformed a humble quick bread into something memorable. When this loaf emerged from the oven, it was more than dessert, it was a statement of domestic confidence and creativity. Coconut had long carried exotic promise in American pantries, especially after World War II when tropical flavors started appearing in mainstream cookbooks. And walnuts offered hearty crunch. Combine them into loaf form, and you have a result that felt elegant, not pedestrian. When the brown butter glaze was poured hot, it soaked into the crust, caramelizing slightly, a finish seldom seen on weekday bread. In the living rooms of suburban America, weekend brunches or Sunday dinners featured this loaf alongside coffee and conversation. It bridged the gap between comfort and sophistication. Yet over time, as convenience foods and boxed mixes rose, this kind of loaf receded into memory. It was too rich, too specific, too homemade. Now, As we bring it back on America's Lost Recipes, the stakes are clear. Rediscovering one dish is more than replicating flavor, it is reviving a moment in food culture when each loaf told a story of pride, community, and kitchen artistry. If you watch through, you will learn not just how to bake it, but why it mattered, and why it deserves a place on your table today. It begins with leftover holiday ham, a head of cheddar, and a waffle iron already warm from breakfast, yet something fresh took shape on Sunday afternoon in kitchens across 1950s America. The ham and cheese waffle bake was no ordinary waffle. It was a rebellion against plain toast, a fusion of convenience and comfort, and a silent symbol of post-war kitchen creativity. As the story goes, enterprising home cooks discovered that folding diced ham and shredded cheese into waffle batter, then baking in a casserole or waffle iron, transformed leftovers into something just as glamorous as a dinner entree. Food editors of the era quietly celebrated savory waffles for bridging the gap between brunch and dinner, between the predictable and the playful. Why the chive crunch? Green onion tops and chives offered a bit of color and freshness, a pop of vibrancy against the buttery waffle grid and salty ham. It was a nod to the kitchen's desire to look modern, yet still homemade. The waffle bake showed up at potlucks, church socials, and family brunches, its golden pockets filled with cheese and ham standing in for the more formal roast dinner. And yet, the dish vanished. As boxed frozen breakfasts, microwaves, and salad bars rose, this layered, savory casserole waffle lost its place. But when we revive it now, we are doing more than reheating a recipe, we are resurrecting a mindset that food can be inventive, resourceful, and communal. So join us as America's Lost Recipes lifts the waffle iron back into the story, reminds us why we once celebrated ham and cheese in waffle form, and asks, what if the comfort foods we forgot still have lessons for us today? It opens in a suburban American kitchen of the late 1950s. The transistor radio hums in the background while a formica-top table is set for dessert. On a chilled glass platter sits a golden ring of carrot and crushed pineapple, crowned with a smooth white blanket of cream cheese frosting. This was more than a dessert, it was a centerpiece. In a time when molds and rings symbolized modernity, this dish signaled that the hostess had flair and the family had abundance. Carrots carried value, a humble root turned elegant. Pineapple, once exotic and canned, brought sparkle and sweetness that felt celebratory. Together they formed a ring, a shape of continuity and community. The cream cheese frosting added a tangy counterpoint to the sweetness and lent texture contrast. According to mid-century cookbooks, combining grated carrots, crushed pineapple with its juice, and folding in nuts or coconut turned a simple loaf or mold into something festive. This dish graced church socials, luncheon clubs, ladies' bridge afternoons, and Sunday dinners when the family gathered after church. The ring's shape invited conversation. Who will get the pineapple chunk? Have you tried the cream cheese edge yet? It told a story of optimism, bright colors, mold form, textures that surprised. But as taste shifted, lighter salads, fresh fruit platters, streamlined desserts, the carrot-pineapple ring faded. It vanished from the mainstream in favor of simpler presentation. Yet when we bring it back today, we are not just recreating a recipe. We are reviving a moment when dessert was display and delight, when texture mattered, when community sat around the table and admired the wobble of a mold with the same care as a fashion accessory. Stay with us as America's Lost Recipes unmolds this ring of memory and sets it on the table once again, because this dish still has something to say about our past, our kitchens, and our taste. It begins at dusk in a mid-century suburban home. The radio plays softly, the chrome of the range reflects a mother's apron and the warm glow of the oven light. The centerpiece of the evening? A golden roast pork loin, its glaze of amber maple and tangy mustard shimmering under the kitchen's fluorescent bulb. On the side, a small dish of raisin relish waits, sweet, chewy, unexpected. This was not your grandmother's Sunday ham. This was something daring. In the years following World War II, the American kitchen was transforming. Home cooks embraced new duo flavors and display dishes that whispered sophistication. Maple syrup, once reserved for breakfast pancakes, was now a glaze. Mustard, usually just a condiment, became a partner in pan-sear drama. A pork loin, rather than a bulky pot roast, symbolized sleek modernity. The glaze of maple and mustard created a sweet savory tension across the pork's crust, while the raisin relish added both texture and a wink of tradition, raisins being one ingredient deeply rooted in older American cookery, yet here reinvented. This dish found its moment in the 1950s and early 1960s, at holiday dinners and midweek splurges alike. But as ovens shifted, convenience rose, and meat glazes grew simpler, the maple mustard pork loin quietly slipped from view. Today, as we gather around the same type of kitchen table that once held it, we are not simply cooking. We are resurrecting optimism on a platter. Welcome to America's Lost Recipes. Watch the next minute to discover the full story behind this dish, how it captured post-war ambition, family togetherness, and a fleeting moment when dinner felt both adventurous and American. If you stay till the end, you will not only reclaim a recipe, you will reclaim a taste of hope from our past. It opens in the warm glow of a suburban 1950s kitchen, a weekly potluck buzzes in the air, coffee percolating, and the chrome baking tray slides from the oven, revealing squares glistening with brown sugar caramel, studded with crisp bacon bits and toasted pecans. This was no ordinary dessert. It was the surprise on the buffet table that dared to blur the line between savory and sweet. In post-war America, home cooks were experimenting. Bacon, once reserved for breakfast, moved into the world of dessert. It partnered with brown sugar and pecans to create something bold and modern. According to classic recipes, chopped bacon, brown sugar, corn syrup, and pecans were layered over a buttery crust, then baked until the top bubbled and set. These squares captured the era's curiosity, texture play, flavor contrast, the newness of sweet meat smoky. These bars showed up at church socials, school bake sales, and family gatherings, offering a little bit of indulgence and a lot of conversation. Have you tried the bacon piece? Yes, it is sticky sweet with that pecan crunch. But as diets shifted, desserts lightened, and the age of the salad bar arrived, this decadent hybrid quietly vanished from everyday rotation. Now, we bring it back not just to taste but to remember. We uncover how this unusual bar told a story about thrift, using leftover bacon, innovation, combining unexpected flavors, and community, sharing at gatherings. Stay with us as America's Lost Recipes cuts a square of memory, bites into nostalgia, and asks what our kitchens lost when we left this dish behind. It opens on a Saturday morning in 1962. The sun slants through the kitchen window, casting golden light across a chrome toaster and a ceramic crock of wooden spoons. On a cooling rack sits a round coffee cake, its golden sponge studded with bits of cherry and apricot, a buttery crumble crust glistening with sugar crystals. The aroma drifts into the hallway, calling the family together before chores begin. This cake was born of an era when brunch was becoming ritual and the home baker was a quiet innovator. The classic American coffee cake, a cake meant to accompany a cup of coffee rather than flavor it, evolved from European immigrant traditions. Apricot cakes in particular surged in popularity in the late 1950s and early 1960s, promoted via boxed mix campaigns and state fair prize ribbons. The pairing of apricot and cherry felt modern yet comforting, apricot for its soft sweetness, cherry for a tangy pop. Folded into cake batter and topped with a simple crumble, the result was familiar yet elevated. It appeared at Sunday brunches, after church gatherings, and the occasional office potluck, always disappearing too fast. Yet as diet trends shifted, butter-rich cakes gave way to lighter yogurts and muffins, the coffee cake faded into nostalgia. But today, when we slice into this cake, we are not just tasting sugar and fruit. We are tasting a moment of hope, the optimism of post-war America, the rise of the suburban kitchen, a time when a cake could whisper, progress and home at once. Stay with us as America's Lost Recipes pulls this crumble-topped memory from the oven, shares its story, and reminds us that sometimes what we lost on our tables is worth rediscovering. It opens in a softly lit suburban kitchen of 1961. The dinner table is set with formica, the radio hums softly, and hovering over the oven timer is a glass ring mold shimmering with spinach, sharp cheddar, and crumbled bacon. This dish looked like a modern marvel, green spinach stacked with bright yellow cheddar, held together in a neat ring, sprinkled with crisp bacon bits. It promised both elegance and ease, the perfect centerpiece for a brunch, a ladies' luncheon or a church potluck. Spinach itself carried the weight of nutrition, but in this dish it was reimagined. Cheddar added boldness. Bacon bits offered crunch and smoky surprise. The ring shape spoke of display, of homemakers showing off not just their cooking skill but their sense of style and hospitality. Vintage cookbooks from the era show similar molds, spinach loaves, ring salads, savory gel molds. This one, the spinach cheddar ring with bacon bits, captured that mid-century fusion of convenience and showmanship. What you tasted was more than ingredients, you tasted community. The ring was lifted out of its mold, placed at the center of the buffet, everyone reached for a slice, the bacon bits crackled, the cheddar melted, the spinach held firm. But as time moved on, the frozen convenience age, the salad bar, the lighter fare eclipsed tapered ring molds. The dish slipped quietly into memory. Today, we bring it back. Not just to cook, but to understand what it meant in an era where home cooking was both practical and theatrical, where every ring carried story, flair, and comfort. Stay with us as America's Lost Recipes unmolds this spinach cheddar ring, reveals its roots, celebrates its crunch, and asks what happens when we let such dishes fade away. It begins in the wake of a grand holiday feast. The bird has been carved, the relatives have gone home, but on the kitchen stove the oven timer still ticks. In that moment of calm, a practical and surprising dish takes shape: turkey, leftover gravy, peas, and carrots, all layered under a golden biscuit crust. A dish born from thrift, tradition, and quietly bold home cooking. Originating in the older British dish of shepherd's pie, which was invented as a way to repurpose cooked meat beneath mashed potatoes. In post-war America, the story of leftovers transformed into something of its own. After the centerpiece roast on Thanksgiving had been served and the table cleared, enterprising home cooks turned to the fridge: turkey, vegetables, dressing, they all found a way into one comforting bake. This shepherd's pie variant offered both comfort and creativity. Swap in a biscuit crust instead of traditional mashed potato or pie crust, and the dish gained texture, warmth, and ease. The biscuit topping called to middle-class Americans looking for comfort without fuss. Serving this casserole at the Sunday table meant reusing with pride, not shame. It was a statement: we are resourceful, we are familial, we are American. Yet as convenience food rose, and pre-made frozen pies and casseroles dominated the freezer, dishes like this slipped from memory. The biscuit-topped turkey shepherd's pie became just leftovers rather than a centerpiece. But when we bring it back today, we are reclaiming more than flavor, we are restoring an attitude, that leftovers tell a story, that repurposing is creative, that family-style cooking is worthy of celebration. Stay with us as America's Lost Recipes lifts the biscuit crust, slices into the stew beneath, and asks, when we forgot this dish, did we also forget the value of what it stood for? The oven's glow flickers in a 1950s suburban kitchen, and on the Formica countertop rests a modest glass baking dish, layered with thin slices of buttered bread, custard seeping between the crusts, raisins peeking out like little time capsules of Sunday dinners past. This is not just dessert, it is a relic of an era when nothing good ever got thrown away, and leftover bread became something rich, comforting, full of memory. This bread and butter pudding emerged in America as an evolution of older English puddings, but with its own flair. The bread slices soaked in milk and eggs, then baked until soft and golden, offered warmth to families in kitchens humming with optimism. And then, the finishing flourish, a warm whiskey sauce, poured slowly atop the pudding, caramelizing into the bread, adding depth, spirit, and a hint of indulgence in an age of prosperity. Picture gatherings where this pudding sat at the center of the table, kids stirring bowls, mothers wiping flour from their aprons, the stove timer ticking softly. The sauce's amber stream told a story of refinement and resourcefulness in the same breath. This was comfort from thrift and elegance from simplicity. Yet as convenience desserts multiplied and the salad course ascended, this kind of pudding faded, forgotten behind freezer aisles and flashier sweets. Today, we reclaim it, we relayer the bread, whisk the custard, pour the whiskey sauce, and in doing so we revive not just a dish, but a mindset of family, frugality, flavor, and the fact that sometimes the simplest things carry the richest stories. Stay tuned as America's Lost Recipes lifts this pudding from the past, slices into memory, and reminds us that the soul of the kitchen is often in what we use to throw away. It opens in a bright suburban kitchen in the late 1950s, the windows are open, the transistor radio plays softly, and on the chrome sideboard sits a glistening ring of pale lemon-yellow gelatin threaded with punchy cranberry bits and tipped with fresh mint leaves. This dish looked almost like glass, modern, sleek, and just a little daring. In the era of the mold salad and the neatly arranged side, the lemon cranberry gelid mold became a showpiece of the homecook's innovation. Gelatin dishes had become a kind of kitchen badge of honor. The brand Jell-O popularized powdered gelatin in the United States, making molds both accessible and fashionable. Cranberries themselves had their moment too. What began as a tart wild berry harvested by Native Americans grew into a marketing staple with the advent of congealed cranberry sauce, which arrived on dinner tables nationwide in the early 1940s. The pairing of lemon's light brightness with cranberry's deep tartness, set in gelatin and chilled until firm, captured the optimism and decorative ambition of the post-war kitchen. But this dish was more than mise en place. It was social, placed at the center of potlucks, holiday dinners, and Sunday afternoons when families gathered. It invited conversation, the gentle wobble as the mold was lifted from the plate, the surprise of fresh mint on top, the interplay of sweet and tart and cold and fresh. Yet as convenience foods, salad bars, and simpler presentations ascended in the later 1960s and 70s, these decorative molds faded into memory. Now, on America's Lost Recipes, we pull this ring back into view. We talk about the era it came from, the pride it held, and why it matters now. Because in reclaiming this lemon cranberry gelid mold, we are reclaiming a mindset, a belief that the everyday dinner table could still feel festive, inventive, and meaningful. It opens in a sunny suburban kitchen of the early 1960s. A cast iron skillet rests on the stove, the oven timer counts down, and on the Formica countertop sits a clear glass baking dish filled with cubed day-old bread, wilted spinach, sautéed mushrooms, melted cheddar, and a custard of eggs and cream. This dish, the mushroom and spinach strata, was quietly revolutionary. It transformed humble leftovers and vegetables into a dish worthy of the brunch table. Strata, the layered casserole of bread, eggs, and add-ins, has its origins in early 20th century America. One of the earliest known recipes, 1902, called simply for bread, white sauce, and cheese. By the 1950s and 60s, home cooks had adapted it for new tastes, sautéed mushrooms for an adult flavor, spinach for color and nutrition, and cheese for richness. The bread cube soaked the custard, mushrooms added depth, spinach added vibrancy, and the whole thing baked into a golden, puffed casserole that looked composed yet felt comfortable. This was the dish that bridged breakfast, brunch, and dinner. It showed up at Sunday gatherings, ladies' luncheons, and even company brings-a-dish events. It communicated thrift, using leftover bread, sophistication, mushrooms were upscale, and community, served from the center of the table. Yet eventually, as lighter breakfasts and packaged convenience foods gained dominance, the strata slipped into the background. Now, we bring it back, not just to resurrect a recipe, but to restore a mindset. Because the mushroom and spinach strata reminds us that resourcefulness and elegance once went hand in hand, that a casserole could feel both casual and curated, and that our kitchens held stories in layers of bread and custard. Stay tuned as America's Lost Recipes lifts the lid, slices into that golden crust, and asks, when we lost this dish, did we lose a bit of our culinary confidence too? It opens in a warmly lit suburban kitchen of the early 1960s. The oven hums while a mother in a soft pastel apron tilts a glass loaf pan out of the oven. Inside is a golden crumb loaf, blue speckled with real blueberries and whispering of summer harvests. A bowl of lemon glaze waits nearby, ready for the final flourish. This is no ordinary sweet bread, it is the buttermilk blueberry loaf with lemon glaze, a quietly bold creation of its era. In mid-century America, quick breads were everywhere, smart, simple, and suited to the new rhythm of suburban life. But this loaf upped the game. Real buttermilk lent tang and tenderness, fresh blueberries, once a luxury, added color, texture, and a sense of freshness. Modern homebakers say the result is a light in texture and sweetness, full of blueberries. Lemon and glaze introduced elegance, a drizzle of sugary citrus that made this loaf feel celebratory. The loaf showed up at Sunday brunches, small gatherings, and mid-morning company calls when homemakers wanted something easy but impressive. It said, "We use good ingredients, we innovate, yet we are still domestic." But as boxed mixes and pre-packaged convenience options grew in the 1970s and 80s, such freshly baked loaves faded into the background. The buttermilk blueberry loaf became just another loaf rather than the showpiece it once was. Here on America's Lost Recipes, we are not simply reviving a recipe. We are reviving a mindset that even in a quick loaf you could find ambition, simplicity, and community. So stay with us as we slice into this loaf, taste the cool blueberries and tangy glaze, and ask, when we let dishes like this slip away, did we lose a bit of kitchen creativity too?